ほら、ルフィ、今一緒に海賊になる仲間を探してるんだ。
Hello guys, welcome to my channel The Wandering Zoro, your go-to destination for anime-related content. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. In today's video, we're going to be diving into Part 7 of the series What If Deku Had Unknow Adaptability Quirk? So be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. The first man swiped at Lizuku with crystal claws. Lizuku dodged and let the man swipe past him as he stuck his leg out, making him trip, hitting his head on the bar and passing out. Another man got close enough to touch Lizuku on the arm. How about this salamander? Placing his hand on Lizuku's arm, he activates his quirk, which causes bramble to grow out of Lizuku's skin, ensnaring him and holding him in place. The other men rush to attack Lizuku with a variety of physical quirks, but as they get close, he breaks out of the bramble, sending jagged splinters all over the bar and hitting the assailants. Some of the thugs covered their eyes as they were hit in the eyes. Stepping over the wailing thugs, he walks toward the man who blocked, allowing most of the splinters to be embedded in his arms. Why do you hate mutants? The man is compelled to answer. Because they are against the natural order. Fiction. Jiren, are there any groups that are discriminatory to any group of people in the underworld? The three main groups who remain are the Creature Rejection Clan, the Inhuman Supremacy Group, and the Quirkless Liberation Front. There were previously four, but now they are currently in hiding after the fall of the Meta Liberation Army. Many of their members had left in fear of your judgment and mercy. Nodding at the information, Lizuku and Jiren walk out of the bar, with Lizuku touching the door on the way out, restoring the bar to before the fight happened. Now in Rumi's apartment, Izuku was looking for information on his laptop to get to know the three extremist groups hidden in the underworld. The Creature Rejection Clan was a group that abhorred the appearance of people with complex mutation quirks and believed those with the quirks no longer qualified as humans and would easily succumb to their quirks' feral instincts. The bar Izuku was owned by one of their members to gather like-minded people. These people mainly espouse their beliefs to the people discreetly. They operate underground, kidnapping people, killing them, and stealing what they own to fuel their purges. They used to have support from influential people, but they have been cut off from their funds after some of their supporters were caught during the MLA cleanup, and the rest got cold feet and ran. The Inhuman Supremacy Group were another group which opposed the beliefs of the CRC. They were made up of people with extensive mutation quirks who believed that they were the next step in evolution, looking than other quirk users as they were weaker. They enforced their authority by conducting violent protests, condemning the discrimination of those with complex mutations. Due to their passionate displays, most of the public have a negative opinion of them. The last was the Quirkless Liberation Front, composed of the quirkless and late bloomers who are seeking retribution for the discrimination done to them. This group mainly acts as informants, weapon smugglers, and vigilantes. The members only attack when provoked or have probable cause that an individual has discriminated against the quirkless. There were a few other groups, but information on them was scarce, and they were relatively small, so Izuku elected to wait and see if they decide to make moves. Izuku's opinion of the main three were the following: quirk supremacists of another genre, and people with good intentions but bad execution. The three groups' prevalence has waned recently, but their members are still active, though scattered. While debating how he was going to seek these groups out, a pair of tan arms wrapped around his shoulders and a chin rested on his head. "What you working on?" "Just researching certain extremist groups in the underworld." "You worried about the guys at the bar? They're a dying breed. No point in wasting your energy on a group so splintered." Izuku chuckled slightly at the pun. He turned his head toward her and embraced her on her blushing cheek. "Even so, they should be stopped from hurting others." "Okay." In a window nearby, a pair of binoculars could be seen peeking into the hero's apartment. The woman peeking wore a violent scowl, looking at the peaceful scene through the balcony door. "That mutant. Don't worry, Envy, you don't need to deal with those things anymore. I'll be the one to save you." Waking up the next morning, Izuku finds himself once again cuddling with Rumi, but this time in her room, with her rubbing her face and his neck to get comfortable. The room was pretty cold, so using Prometheus, he heated up his body, slightly making Rumi cuddle tighter. Izuku lay there enjoying the sensation, waiting for a few minutes for Rumi to wake up. Rumi started to stir awake, so Izuku decided to speed up the process a little. Rumi's eyes widened, but soon fell closed as she savored it. Pulling away a string of saliva was still connected to both of their lips for a few moments before breaking away. Morning Rumi. The sight of a blushing Izuku must have gotten to her as she hid her blushing face. Izuku laughed slightly due to how adorable she was being. Come on, we need to get ready. Finally getting out of bed, the two of them get to their usual routine, with Izuku getting ready a bit early and preparing breakfast while Rumi helped after getting changed. After breakfast, they had their morning spar in the forest. Today Izuku will be fighting with a base human with a slight strength enhancer, mainly using weapons made using item creation to even the playing field. Standing in the clearing across from each other, Izuku summoned a white stone bow staff and slung it on his shoulder. So what am I fighting this time? You fighting against a strength enhancer and item creation. That's it? You better start ramping up quick, or it's gonna be boring. Izuku smiled at the response as Rumi engaged. Pulling the staff off his shoulders, he swings to strike at Rumi, who raises her arm to block, but Izuku stops the swing before it makes contact with her arm, though the same doesn't happen to the end of the staff, which curves around and strikes the back of her head, making her trip forward, slightly setting her up to be hit by the other end of the staff, sending her back a few steps. The hell was that? Villains don't use bow staffs? I would have thought they would be popular, though considering how they use their quirks it shouldn't be surprising. Rumi rushed in again as Izuku spoke, but before she could get close the staff extended and poked her stomach, stopping her pursuit. Rumi smiled at the development as the staff retracted. Okay, now you're getting me pumped up. Rushing back in, Rumi was a lot more careful of the staff's positioning, getting into areas where it was less effective. She managed to get a few strikes in, launching Izuku back a few steps, so he decided to pick up the pace. Rumi's kicks were starting to strike the staff more and more as Izuku intercepted the attacks. The exchange continues for the next half hour, with Izuku switching to different weapons to spice things up. By the end of it, Rumi was sitting with her back against a tree, she just hit with a satisfied smile on her face. Walking up to her and unsummoning his war hammer, he placed his hand on her shoulder and used overhaul to restore her strained muscles to their new prime state, using some of his own body mass subconsciously so she wouldn't feel as much pain from her muscles threading themselves together. Rumi gets up and starts to stretch out the newly formed muscle, feeling the new power she now has. She got into a stance and kicked toward Izuku's head, but Izuku didn't move. The kick stopped a few millimeters away from his left cheek, sending a powerful air blast comparable to a full-powered punch from Chimera, destroying some trees in the way. With a smile on her face, she puts her leg down. When did you learn to do that? I feel so much stronger. I've been trying to make it so overhaul doesn't hurt when used to heal people. I take it that it didn't hurt too much, did it? Who do you think I am? That little sting won't make me flinch. After fixing up the forest from their training, Izuku warped the two of them floating above the city. Having a look around with quirk sight, would-be villains were out in public acting normally and doing their daily routine, not making a fuss. Landing in one of the alleyways, Invincible and Miruko walk out to do their patrol. Passers-by noticed them wave, and the heroes waved back. In the alleys, there were a few people on the phone saying a few words and disappearing into the back alleys. Patrolling for an hour, they didn't find any incidents, so they agreed to split up to hopefully lure out some desperate villains and criminals. Invincible warped away, leaving Miruko in the middle of the street. Cracking her neck, she leaps away, jumping between buildings to continue her patrol. Invincible warped into a back alley and used Gecko and Beast Boy to turn into a complex mutant, careful not to go too far and make himself intimidating. Izuku now looked like an anthropomorphic lizard man with sand-colored scales adorned with blunted spikes, straining against the beat-up shirt, pants, and shoes made with item creation. Walking near the bar, Izuku wanted to lure out the people yesterday. Going past a dark alley, multiple pairs of hands quickly reached out and grabbed Izuku, covering his mouth with a moist cloth. Izuku managed to struggle out of the man's grip and turned around to face him. He sees three men in dark cloaks on the ground after being thrown off of him, watching him as if waiting for something. Izuku, feigning panic, he speaks to them. Who are you people? What did you do to me? The hooded men looked at each other and whispered, "Why isn't the sedative working? He might have a tolerance, that mutant. Just give it a few more seconds to do its magic." Wah! Lizuka's shut, and he falls on the floor. The three men get up and dust themselves off while putting away the sedative. Geez, what quirk does that freak have? Whatever. Tie him up and put him with the others. They pick up their new captive, restrain them using chains, and put him in a box which was then placed onto a truck. The box only had a few holes on the top which allowed a small amount of light into it. Lizuku opened his eyes and looked around to see that he was surrounded by other mutation quirk users. After a few minutes of a bumpy ride, they seemed to have reached their destination and began to unload their captives from the truck and onto a transport cart. They took their stock into a storeroom and began to unload. A few shrieks of fear could be heard and people were taken out and placed into steel cages. Faint sobbing could be heard as the kidnappers banged on the cages. "Shut up. You just put this cage at the front of the line, freak. I at least expect you to understand that." The haulers got to Lizuka's box and opened it, finding him inside still asleep. Picking him up by the collar, they throw him into the noisy cage, making him land roughly. Seeing that he was still asleep, one of the guards pulled out a cattle prod and used it on Lizuku's neck. He made his body jerk violently as he faked a gasping scream before his body loosened with his limbs, trying to support his smoldering body. The other captive backed away from the sight, looking at it in fear and turning away as the guard looked at each and every one of them before scoffing. Turning around, he gets out and locks the cage tight. The other captives stopped tensing against the back wall and slowly approached the smoldering face-down boy. Before they could get close, the boy gets up causally and dusts himself off, seemingly unharmed by the electricity. Looking around the cage, he sees 4 other people looking at him in confusion, along with the other cages. There were 10 cages in the room, each containing 5 people, and the CRC did not discriminate. It didn't matter what age or gender, all they deemed impure were captured. "Are you not hurt?" A child with small deer antlers and hoofed limbs spoke from a nearby cage. The others waited anxiously for the newcomer's response. "I'm okay. It's gonna take a lot more than a little shock to put me down. How long have you stayed here?" The child, a little weirded out by the confidence, didn't answer. A bullman in a different cage chimed in. "It's been about a week. Every day, 1 cage of people is taken out and brought to God knows where." Looking around with Quirk's sight and X-ray, he sees the CRC members gathering in what appears to be a hall. Some of their quirks were quite interesting, especially those that were standing on a raised platform. The ability to boost and heal in a radius would be helpful, along with a potential synergy for hacking. That, and there was someone in the basement with a very high quirk factor. Lizuku walked towards the bars of the cage. "Don't bother. If anything passes the bars, an alarm sounds and they'll be here in seconds." Getting near the bars, they bend open and allow him through. Some in the cages looked away, waiting for the alarms, but nothing happened except for all of their cages bending and twisting open in shock. They all opened their eyes at the sound and looked towards the obvious cause, the boy whose form was now shifting until it became someone they recognized. "Invincible? Good. Some of you know me." Invincible opens a warp gate to Mustafu police station and guides the kidnapped people through. After making sure everyone got through, he followed them out. Appearing at the back of the crowd of mutants, the police were already asking some of the adults why they were there. There were a few other people nearby, but they were just looking over at the small crowd curiously. Invincible walked to the front of the crowd, the police now noticing him. "Invincible, these people were kidnapped, yes?" "Yeah, I'm gonna go back and capture the villains, so prepare a pretty big holding cell." Invincible immediately warps away, leaving behind the office he was talking to. The cops sighed. They were in for some major paperwork processing so many people. Appearing back inside the room of cages, Invincible takes out his phone and pings his location to the police station so they can sweep the building after he is done. Looking around with Quirk's sight and X-ray, he sees a few guards outside the room and near the entrance to the building and goes to capture them. The guards outside the room had large dark cloaks, which obscured their features. On their belt were the cattle prod and a radio. They had their backs to the room. "Why the hell do we even keep these things again?" "Don't ask me, man. They don't tell us anything, but as long as they are cleansed, I have no complaints." Invincible walked out of the room, shocking the guards who immediately recognized him. They tried to alert the others, but they were quickly knocked out and stored. One of their radios suddenly activated. Entrance to door guard checking in. Invincible used Doppelganger to copy the guard's voice. All clear. Invincible began to warp around the building, capturing the guards and disabling the surveillance. With that,
Task done, he moved on to the main course in the hall. As he got near the door, the guards weren't able to even yell before they were taken out. The door to the hall opened as Invincible's hair shimmered. Slice plus chronostasis. His hair shot out and struck each of the members, locking them in place. Walking up to the raised platform, the leaders of the faction looked at him with fear in their eyes as he placed his hand on a select few people. Mastermind taken. Quirk synergy. Mastermind, hacking, technopathy. Energizer taken. Incense taken. Quirk synergy. Incense, super regeneration, overhaul, rewind, muscle augmentation, body bulk, Horus. Purge taken. Pain taken. Infection taken. Quirk synergy, energy suck, infection, pain, food debilitate. Seeing all of her comrades lose their birthright, she panicked trying to get out of the effects of chronostasis. Her efforts were in vain as Invincible placed his hand on her head. Purity taken. Quirk synergy, adaptation, energizer, purity limit breaker. Before chronostasis could wear off, everyone in the room was placed into storage. With the room emptied, Invincible had a look at the new synergies. Technopathy, control of electronics and data. Horus, heals all in a radius regardless of allegiance. The closer the someone is to the user, the faster the healing with instant healing from skin contact. Quirk heals at the cost of users' muscle mass. Debilitate. People afflicted by the quirk feel tired, sick, have increased sensibility to pain, and are starving. User is also afflicted by the quirk with the effects multiplying by the number of people affected. Limit breaker. Removes limiter on other quirks including safety limiters. Interested in limit breaker's effects, he used it on life force. Immediately, he feels a new resistance in his joints as his body locks in place, though he doesn't seem to age backwards. Moving around, he eventually gets used to the new resistance. Opening his quirk list, he sees a slight change in the quirk. Life Force Plus. Life Force Plus. Lifespan is now indefinite. Exponential joint stiffening based is on age. Effect dampened by sufficient musculature and regeneration of joints. Looking around, he finds a way into the basement. Walking down, he finds himself in what looks like a fantasy catacomb with stone brick walls and candles lighting the way. At the end of it was a wooden door with a metal handle. Opening the door, it led to a circular chamber that looked like a summoning room with an altar in the middle and a large coffin placed upright in the back, which held the person, with a large quirk factor. Strange, even this close I can't tell what quirk he has. Opening the coffin, he finds a man in a butler outfit, fingerless gloves, round monocle, and a wolf cut styled into a slicked-back ponytail. Wanting to find out what his quirk was, Invincible reached his hand towards the man. Before he could make contact, the man's eyes open, and Invincible's right arm is chopped to bits. This surprises Invincible, as nothing should be able to cut into him. The man gets up and jumps to the other side of the room with shimmering wires twirling around him. Invincible turns as his minced arm returns to him with the red tendrils leaving behind a trail of dried blood. Alucard. I see you've been busy. Who? You don't fool me, Count. How long has it been since we've met? Decades? Centuries? Look, man, I'm not who you think I am. Do you even know where you are? What's your name? The man squints his eyes and tenses his hand. Wires wrapped around Invincible's torso, splitting him in half, but the halves don't get the chance to hit the ground before tendrils from both grabbed onto each other and reattached the two halves together. The man didn't look surprised by the development. Then, how do you explain your undeath? Do you underestimate me that much that a slight change like that would hide you? Wires wrap themselves on all of Invincible's limbs and try to twist them off, but the limbs don't move. In fact, they don't get anywhere further than the green armor that surrounds him as they snap when Invincible swings his arms. The man shocked forms his wires into a spear and stabs at Invincible, but it stops when it lands on Invincible's chest and unravels. Invincible's eyes gain a red vertical pupil. Stop. The man freezes in place, his head still able to move. Invincible places his hand on the altar, and the room morphs, giving the both of them a seat.
Sit.
Robotically, the man sits down with a scowl on his face. What is your name? The man is compelled to answer. Walter C. Dornez.
Fact.
Who is Alucard? He is a true vampire, the first to exist, once known as Vlasteeps.
Fact.
Dracula is real? Who would have thought? You've answered my question. It's fair that you ask yours. And why should I monster? Just kill me and get it over with. I'm sure Integra would be happy to see my corpse. Nobody is dying today. I already beat everyone in the CRC, and I just need to figure out why they have you down here and been apparently feeding you people with mutation quirks. Speaking of the CRC, give me a moment. A warp gate opens behind Invincible as he leaves a confused Walter stuck to a chair. After a few minutes, Invincible returns to an annoyed Walter still in his chair. Hopefully letting you sit there cooled you down. Now, do you have any questions? Who are you? I'm Izuku Midoriya, otherwise known as the hero Invincible. What year is it? It's 2159, March 13th. Walter stays silent for a moment. Are we in Japan? Yes, we are. You teleported before.
How?
I have a quirk which creates warp gates that allow for instantaneous travel across any distance. Quirk, not power or ability. You don't know about quirks? You must have been in there for quite a while then. Quirks are abilities manifested at the age of 4 for 80% of the population, with the percentage still rising. They can range from a basic strength enhancer to matter manipulation. Everyone born in the last century should know of the term, so I assume you're a lot older than you look. I was born after the Great War in 1930.
Fact.
You really are an old-timer. How have you survived until now? Does it have anything to do with your quirk factor? I don't know what a quirk factor is, but I allowed a Nazi doctor to change me so that I had a chance to face Alucard. He turned me into an artificial vampire.
Fact.
Artificial? True vampires can only exist if they are aired by being bitten by a true vampire of the opposite gender, and the bitten still virginal, or, in a desperate state, they willingly consume the blood of others after abandoning their faith.
Fact.
What if someone is bitten just for sustenance? Nothing will happen to them unless the vampire wills that they will be under their control, turning them into a ghoul. Ghouls are rotting corpses that follow the vampire's every command.
Fact.
Do you know where Alucard could be?
No.
After so many years, he could have taken a number of forms, or he is in stasis waiting for his next master.
Fact.
Release. The resistance on Walter's body disappears as he slowly gets up. You're not going to go around killing anyone you see, are you?
No.
Unless they provoke me. Good. Now, do you need blood to survive? Not entirely. I am able to consume normal food, but I will need to ingest blood from time to time to not go mad from blood hunger. Then would you be willing to consume mine? Why are you so ready to offer your blood? Do you think I won't betray you? You've been civil so far, not counting when.
You woke up. Invincible reached his arm out, and it unraveled into tendrils, which reached over to Walter's mouth. Walter hesitates, but the scent of blood makes him bite down on the appendage, and he feels something change. The strain he felt from using his wires before was gone, and the taste of a good cigarette and wine fell on his tongue. The memories of the hero in front of him began to reveal themselves. They showed him the boy's journey and his experiences. His power was overwhelming, maybe stronger than the Count. The world was completely different from what it was. Helsing was gone. Millennium was gone. Iscaria was gone. All traces of vampirism were erased from common knowledge and merely relegated to folklore and myth. There was even a hero named after that thing who had the ability to control blood. After a few minutes, Walter detaches, pulls out a handkerchief, and dabs away the remaining traces of blood which had dried on his lip as the tendril returns to an arm. A warp gate opens behind him, leading to the outside. Walking through, he sees the same sunlight as he's seen before, though it was a bit brighter than he was used to, as he was no longer in London. Some police tried to arrest the man, but Invincible stopped them. Don't arrest him, I'll keep an eye on him. Just let me write the report so when you interrogate him, you won't ask redundant questions. The next few hours were a bit of a blur for Walter, as he was asked about his past by an office that claimed to be able to detect lies from speech. He wondered why children were still trained to be soldiers when there wasn't a major threat to their lives, but maybe it was so peaceful that this game of heroes and villains was just entertainment. At least that was his impression, as the heroes were more like celebrities of his time. Now inside a well-furnished office, he was sat on a couch with a tea in hand that he quite enjoyed. There must have been some advancement in tea-making, or this rodent was just that good. The rat's expression stiffened slightly, as if knowing what he was thinking. "I would prefer that you don't refer to me that way, Mr. Dornes." I apologize, I wasn't aware my thoughts were so obvious. This tea is quite amazing. No offense taken. There is much I am interested in that I hope you have answers to. After dropping off Walter with Nizu, Izuku decided to check in with the doctor to inquire if he knew of Alucard or the assault on London by Millennium, hoping to get more detailed information on them. Walking into the lab, the doctor was surrounded by other researchers looking over some clipboards and discussing something. Dr. Garaki turned and greeted his master. "Afternoon, Master. What has brought you here?" "The knowledge that you might possess of the Millennium Organization and Alucard." The doctor was a bit shocked to hear those words. He dismissed the other researchers by waving his hand. "Excuse us. Master, follow me." Garaki led Izuku to his personal office and began to dig out some documents. Placing them on the table, he allowed Izuku to look through them. Millennium was drafted by the Nazis during World War II as a long-term project to research the supernatural and replicate its effects in their soldiers, but their experiments were halted by a younger Walter and Alucard who was disguised as a little girl. During the assault, the top brass managed to escape the culling into South America with a small battalion and items stolen from Holocaust victims to help conceal themselves, helped along by the Vatican. The organization reappeared in 1999 when they attacked both America and London with an army of artificial vampires. The Vatican gathered to fight them off, but they were at a stalemate until Alucard appeared and consumed the ranks of both sides in the city, raising those he had drank from as a tidal wave of ghouls to destroy the troops of both the Vatican and Millennium. By the end of it, all members of Millennium were killed, yet their documents were saved and archived as a record of their delusion and existence. Garaki spoke as Izuku finished reading. "Even as a young man, I was always interested in the research they had to alter the human genome. I scoured the world to look for data pertaining to it. It was their research that allowed me to successfully create the Nomus. People changed and altered to handle the strain of power and its consequences. Fact. Would access to more of Millennium's research expedite the process of reversing the nomification? Unfortunately, no. Millennium was only interested in altering people regardless of the effects. Their research was quite unethical, wasting many lives, but they found a key: Mina Harker, a sire of Alucard. Her corpse was dug up after centuries, and it had yet to fully decay. The body still had the blood of a true vampire flowing through its veins, allowing Millennium to replicate some of Alucard's vampiric abilities. Her body was lost during the assault of the Fourth Reich. Fact. Has there been any info on the whereabouts of Alucard and Sarah's Victoria? If they are true vampires, then they should still be around. No. When I started my search, the Helsing organization was already disbanded after their leader Sir Integra Fairbrook Wingate's Helsing had passed of old age, not leaving behind an heir, but allowing someone else to lead the organization for a few years before the British government cut their funding when the rise of quirks became prevalent. I would guess that they're somewhere near the UK, maybe Europe. Fact. All right then. That was a bit less than I expected, but that's fine. How is the denomification coming along? Things are going steady. We are currently on animal trials trying to reverse the effect placed on mice, but there has yet been a successful result. Fact. And Nizu approved of it? I thought he would object. He did in the beginning, but this was the only way for the other researchers to study the process to find a way to reverse it somewhat ethnically. Fact. Okay. Hopefully you'll get results soon. I should go. It seems the researchers have much to discuss with you. Yes, Master. I promise that you will not be disappointed. Fact. A warp gate opens behind Izuku and swallows him whole. Appearing back in Nizu's office, he finds it empty, leaving Izuku confused. I wasn't gone that long, was I? Looking around with quirk sight, he saw Walter's quirk factor in the gym Delta and some of the staff near him. I should probably figure out why vampirism looks like a quirk factor when there is no quirk. Warping into the gym, He sees Walter and Aizawa sparring with Nizu and Recovery Girl spectating in the observation room. The arena had a mess of shredded bandages with Aizawa breathing heavily and cuts all over his body. The ground near them looked like someone had taken a blade to it, leaving gouges in the concrete floor. Aizawa ran at Walter with his dagger, trying to slash at him, but Walter weaved shields out of his wires to deflect the attacks until he got a hold of the knife blade, slicing it into pieces. Valiantly fought, hero. You would be quite a nuisance facing anyone else. Izuku lands next to Aizawa, places his hand on his shoulder, and uses Horus. A green aura covers his body as the cuts immediately heal and the bags under his eyes disappear. He's never felt more awake. Wanted to stretch your legs, Walter? This vagabond wanted a show of my skills. Aizawa stood straighter, surprised by the newfound energy in his body. Thanks for the pep-up, Midoriya. Where the hell did you find him? In a dungeon. Incredulous expression appeared on Aizawa's face as Nizu could be seen walking out of the observation room with Recovery Girl. All right, Aizawa, let's see the damage. Getting closer, she sees that he is completely fine minus the missing bandages and damaged clothes. Looking over to Midoriya, everything becomes clear. The boy had gotten a new tool in his belt. We need to get you into the nurse's office. Izuku opens a warp gate, and they all arrive there in an instant. Making Aizawa sit on the bed, Recovery Girl began her examination, checking for any defects that may have occurred during Izuku's healing. Comparing his condition to before he was healed, he was completely healed. In fact, he was better than was ever recorded. It was like he was biologically younger with how healthy he was now. Do you have a youthful healing quirk now, Midoriya? I do now. I got it during the raid on the CRC. You should leave a clone here. Your classmates have been intense as of late. Sure, but he will only use quirks to heal if it is an emergency, because you don't want them to completely rely on you for healing. Nizu interjected. Yeah, my type of healing allows them to throw caution to the wind and fight until they drop. The only time it should be needed is if they are hurt badly by a villain or need to train to be stronger in a short time. It has been a swell time talking about the boy's abilities, but what will be done with me? I don't assume you'll allow me in the public. How about a teaching position? No need for a veteran like you to still be on the field. Walter's brow twitched at the mention of his age, but he considered the offer. Take your time. In the meantime, you can observe the students at your discretion. It may help you come to a decision. If the whole teaching thing doesn't work out, you could also help me track down Alucard and Ceres. This perks his interest, yet he doesn't immediately make a decision. Seeming surprised by his own hesitance, he gets up and leaves unimpeded. After leaving a clone in Recovery Girl's office, Izuku went to his personal gym as he had to test out the last two synergies he got, which were Debilitate and Technopathy. Walking into the gym, he stood in the middle of it and closed his eyes, activating Technopathy. The darkness of his closed eyes remained, but wire meshes of wires and terminals lit the dark world. Flows of binary and electricity could be seen, as well as pulses of distorted air representing the Wi-Fi upstairs. Opening his eyes, the meshes remained, but at lower opacity. He could now see how each wire powered or supported each item in the gym along with the building. Following the wires, he finds his computer and accesses it remotely with a screen appearing in front of him along with a keyboard. Izuku walked to his room where the computer was, with the screen still following him, and he saw that the computer remained off. Izuku then warped to the middle of the Sea of Japan, still followed by the screen of his computer, which he still had full control of. Looking underwater, he sees the undersea cable line which connects Japan and Russia. Tapping into the line, he found he had access to all devices connected to its services as tens of millions of screens appeared around him, stretching into the horizon. Dismissing the screens, Izuku warps back into the gym and produces some overhaul clones. Activating Debilitate, the clones stumble, but try to keep themselves up as they are sweating and becoming gaunter. Izuku falls onto his knees as his body splits open, allowing tendrils to writhe around him before they lunge and stab into the clones with newly formed sharp metal blades, making the clones dissipate. Without a target, Debilitate deactivates, which allows Izuku to try and get his body in order, but it doesn't listen as the tendrils refuse to retract. I'm starving. That's new. Using item creation, it generates a large mound of flesh, and the tendrils immediately converge upon it, tearing the mound into pieces. The tendrils mutated mouths of sharp, jagged teeth and consumed the now shredded flesh. After a few minutes, the floor was clear of all signs of the feast, with Izuku's body returning to what it once was. Generating another mound, he tested the quirk again with the same amount of clones. The clones stagger again, the same with Izuku, but the amount of tendrils released was about half of what it was. Before the tendrils could move, Izuku used Horus to try and quell his hunger, which worked a charm as the tendrils obediently retreated back into his body. The mound of flesh disappeared into dust using decay as Izuku solidified his findings. Technopathy allowed a complete view and control of technology, regardless of range, while debilitate was best for one-on-one fights, with using it on large groups needed to be trained to not cause unnecessary causalities. With that done, Izuku returned to the public to resume his patrol, though that was kinda a moot point, as with the recent capture of the CRs, the villains had gone into hiding with only small muggings taking place. The next day, Walter seemed to have made up his mind. He would stay in UA as a teacher specializing in information gathering and time management, but he wanted to be in the loop when Alucard was found. Izuku began his search for Alucard within Japan just in case he was brought here like Walter, but unfortunately, he was not. With his whereabouts currently unknown, Izuku gets in contact with La Brava through Nizu to look through over 100 years of records to determine where he might be. With the search now out of his hands, he fell back into the routine of going to UA, patrol, and Rumi. Izuku wanted to search outside of Japan himself, but the Japanese government was not willing to let their strongest out for something as trivial as a search. Now that the CRC was mostly gone with a few fringe members scattered across Japan, the Inhuman Supremacy Group was moving to get closer to him as they believed that Invincible was at least sympathetic to their cause. Their protests and campaigns were getting more and more violent, leading to property damage, and heroes needed to mediate. Invincible and Miruko were doing their usual patrol, stopping for a snack, as there were no incidents so far, though there was a high concentration of emitter and transformation quirk users hidden in areas near them as if waiting for something. Patrolling into the center of the mass, Izuku receives a convenient call from the hero system that informs heroes of urgent incidents. A Nomu breakout had happened in Nagoya, and they were tearing the city apart. Looking around with X-ray, he sees the emitter quirk users looking tensed at their phone or out of windows at Invincible. Wanting to see their plan in motion, Invincible decides to go along with the ruse. Miruko, I'm needed in Nagoya. Just go, I'm sure I'll be fine. Been a while since I could stretch my legs. Nodding, Invincible warps away, leaving an excited Miruko who was getting warmed up as a crowd of people began to surround her. Invincible appeared above Nagoya and saw the city with a few pillars of smoke coming from multiple buildings. People were running away from what appeared to be Nomu, but they were anything but convincing. The Fomu were villains in disguise who had strength enhancers or transformation/emitter quirks. Warping the civilians to a safe house, Invincible sends multiple clones to the smoke and lands in front of the Fomus closest to him, who visibly flinched upon his arrival. For hired thugs, you're not very good at acting. Did your employers tell you why you were doing this? The villains are compelled to answer. We are to attack and show the world that we, the pure, are best. Fiction. Yeah, not happening. The large Fomu rushed at Invincible while the other shot fire needles. The large Fomu kept punching at Invincible, but it was having no effect, yet he didn't stop. The same was happening to the fire needles, which broke upon contact with Invincible's hero costume. I can at least commend you both for your commitment to try and slow me down and distract me, but I think we're about done here. With a wave of his hand, the large villain was knocked into the other, making them both pass out and for their disguises to fall off. Invincible then used Overhaul to fix the damaged buildings. After warping the villains to a gathering site prepared by one of the clones, he opened the hero system and reported the incident as a false alarm. It was just the remaining members of the CRC pulling a Hail Mary. Invincible warps back into the air, overlooking the city. Seeing it now repaired, he warped the civilians back to where they were before the attack. The citizens looked up to see Invincible floating in the air and cheered, thanking him for his help. Giving them a salute goodbye, he warps away to the villain holding area outside the station to help the officers contain and process the villains arrested. After a few minutes, with the processing done, Invincible bids the officers farewell and warps back above where he left Miruko. Looking down, he sees her next to a mound of unconscious bodies, still fighting an ever-coming swarm of bodies. Turning into a small fly with Beast Boy, he lands on the side of a building and waits for the eventual big boss to show themselves. After 10 minutes, finally, the big guns arrive. Miruko turned to them barely winded with a light sweat and a smile on her face. Finally, you came out of your foxholes. The final vanguard consisted of 2 people, a man and a woman. The man's quirk was empowerment via the suffering of those around him, and considering the veritable pile of bodies, he should be pretty strong, while the woman's quirk was air density manipulation, which was pretty simple, but seeing as she came out last, she must have a good grasp of its capabilities. The man rushed forward and punched the ground, destroying the asphalt. The ground cracked and turned jagged and uneven, making it difficult to get good footing as the floor could easily give, making movement less effective. Miruko jumped away, but she seemed to hit a ceiling in the air, making her fall, priming her for the punch to the side, which sent her through a wall into a nearby building. How'd you like that, mutant? Miruko leaps out of the hole with a kick aimed at the man, but she feels her feet land on a surface mid-flight, so she kicks off of it and lands on the ground. I think you're going soft on me. Does my appearance bother you so much? Shut up, freak. You should not have used such temptation to corrupt the pure. So you do find me alluring. Then stop holding back and fight me like a man. Miruko disappeared, making the villains look around to pinpoint her location, but it was too late as Miruko appeared above the man. Luna collapsed. The kick landed on the villain's shoulder and caused a large shockwave, sending the villain into the ground, destroying the road and smashing the windows on the buildings around them. The dust kicked up by the attack cleared, and in the middle of the road was a large crater with the male villain pressed down by Miruko in it, embedded in the dirt and stone. The villain tried to move their arms to strike at Miruko, but she restrained both of his arms by standing on them. Now above the villain, Miruko bends back a bit, then forward, and slams her head against the villains, finally making the man pass out. Invincible got a great angle of the move, which embarrassed him, making him look away until Miruko stood back up. Miruko, with a smile, looked up to the female villain floating in the air with an air platform that was revealed as smoke and dust collided with it, outlining it. The villain swung her arm at Miruko, making an invisible slash cut through the dust. Miruko dodged to the side as an air blade flew past her, gouging a line on the ground. The villain continued to shoot air slashes at Miruko, but she was too fast for any of them to land. Miruko did try to get close to the villain, but an air platform would appear and get in her way. After a few minutes, Miruko was getting frustrated, and the villain looked tense, occasionally looking around as if looking for something. Taking advantage of their distraction, Miruko tries to lunge toward the villain, but she doesn't even get off the ground as a platform appears in her way. Recoiling from the bump, a stabbing sensation was felt in her calves. Looking down, she sees a syringe stabbed into her calves by one of the unconscious villains she had defeated before. A pulsing pain ran through her body, making her fall to her knees as the female villain floated down right in front of her. How does it feel, Mutie? It's freeing, isn't it? You're now finally pure. The voice she heard was more muffled than usual. What the hell are you going on about? You mutants are stupider than I thought. Don't you recognize the syringe? The same one Envy was shot by in Tartarus. Miruko reached up to her head and felt that her rabbit ears were gone. She then looked in her peripheral vision and saw her hair turning from white to a raven black. You're perfect for Envy now, but without a quirk, someone like you could never keep up with him. Now that you're out of the running, Envy can finally notice what he has been missing. I'll teach him to love what he will have with me. He might be sad about you not being there, but what does he know? I can't wait to get close to him. I'll show him the charm of a real woman, and he'll. The woman began to feel herself up with hearts in her eyes as she rubbed her thighs. She suddenly felt a hand on her shoulder, so she turned around to see Invincible in all of his glory. Darling, you're here. We have so much Invincible grabs her neck and lifts her off her feet. Didn't know you were into this. You've done this with her, haven't you? Don't worry, I'm much bet you. The pressure around her neck tightens as she finally takes a good look at Invincible, but he wasn't looking at her. Instead, he was looking at Miruko with his hand outstretched with a golden glow. Miruko suddenly felt her hearing clear and looked up to see Invincible, who had a guilty look on his face. The villain was squirming in his hold, looking angrily at the now healed Miruko. Sorry, you had to endure that. Why did you heal her? I am perfect for you. With struggling breaths, the villain interrupted. Before she could continue to speak, she felt an unbearable hunger come upon her as the pain around her neck increased exponentially. Did I anger you, Envy? I was just speaking my mind. Invincible looked back at the villain, who expected him to answer her, but he only looked at her with annoyance before she felt her mouth fuse shut. She started to panic, clawing at her now sealed mouth trying to cut it open. She tried to use her quirk, but the familiar awareness of the air around her was gone. Before she could try too long, her limbs bulged and burst into a mist of blood before collapsing back into her body. Her limbs were now gone, and in their place were smooth areas where limbs once connected. Invincible dropped the now gaunt villain on the jagged floor face first, and walked towards Miruko, pulling her into a hug, sitting on the floor of the crater. Izuku, you didn't have to do that to her. Don't try to hide it, Rumi. Even if you don't believe a single word out of that thing's mouth, it would still hurt to hear that. Tears threatened to leak out of Rumi's eyes, so Izuku tucked her head into his chest as the tears flowed. Izuku held her close and whispered as she let her feelings out. The villain on the ground writhed and squirmed, looking at the sight of her man with the mutant. The area around Izuku began to morph and move, restoring the buildings and roads to what they once were. A clone leaks off of Izuku as he warps away, leaving the clone to deal with the villains on the ground. Izuku opens his eyes the next morning in Rumi's bed with Rumi sleeping right on top of him, hugging him tightly, her head buried in the crook of his neck. Izuku was currently shirtless as Rumi preferred the skin contact and warmth when they slept together. Slowly sitting up, he repositioned her so he could sit up a bit while not disturbing her sleep and wrapped his arms around her. After half an hour, Rumi's ears fluttered and brushed against his cheek as she woke up and moved her head slightly to see Izuku looking down at her with a slightly worried expression. Feeling better? Instead of answering, she pulls Izuku in. After a few seconds, they separate and she lays her head on his chest. Yeah, thanks for this. What kind of boyfriend would I be if I didn't do something like this? Rumi blushes, pointing her gaze down. She saw that Izuku was shirtless, only wearing shorts, while she was wearing an oversized white shirt and spats. Feeling her chest against his with only the fabric of the shirt made her blush harder as a small sliver of smoke emanated from her head. The door to the bedroom suddenly opened, making the two look at who had invaded their space. Ryukyu slowly poked her head into the room carefully. Rumi, I saw what happened yesterday. Are you finally seeing the scene? A bright blush appeared on her face as she retreated back behind the quickly closed door, and considering the two's current state of dress, her reaction was reasonable. A small scream was heard outside of the door as Ryukyu shrieked out of embarrassment. After a few minutes, the three were now sitting on the couch. Izuku and Rumi sat like they were caught by their parents, and Ryukyu sat at the other side, not knowing what to say. Rumi gave Ryukyu annoyed a side-eye, which Ryukyu responded with a guilty look. Izuku breaks the awkward silence. So, what did you mean you saw what happened yesterday? I think it's best if you just watched. Ryukyu picked up the remote and turned on the TV. Video of Invincible was released yesterday of him dispatching a villain in a disturbing manner. We will be broadcasting a censored edition, though we recommend parents and the faint of heart to change the channel before the video begins. Some of us in the studio will be doing the same. After a few seconds, the video was shown. The person recording was in a building, recording from a window. The villain could be heard speaking somewhat clearly considering the distance. Invincible showed up and dealt with the villain before picking up Miruko, leaving a clone and warping away. In the footage, it could be clearly heard that the villain, now identified as Chiyo Hanamura, a member of the splintered creature rejection clan with the quirk Aragel, with an obsession and delusion of the hero Invincible, believing that she should be the hero's lover, and orchestrated an assault on the heroine Miruko to, in her words, remove the impure. This action had enraged Invincible as he had deformed the stalker. Many in the public have voiced the opinion that the villain dealt with justly considering the circumstances, but there are those who disagree with the severity of the punishment dealt. A montage of people who were near the incident was shown as they stated what they thought. Most just thought it was justified what he did to the villain, while on the other side, thought it was inhumane to leave the villain in that state. Ryukyu, feeling like they had gotten the gist of it, turned the TV off. That villain said some pretty horrible things about you. I wanted to know how you were doing. I'm doing better now, Ryuko. Someone like that wouldn't get in my head. With a motherly look, Ryuko responds. Rumi, if it didn't hurt, you wouldn't have to be teleported away. Rumi, not knowing what to say, stayed silent. At least you had someone to get you out before you got revealed as a crybaby. As if I would get caught like that. The two women continued their light banter as Izuku discreetly slipped away to make breakfast for all of them. With the whole thing behind them, they got back to what they usually do, though Ryuko insisted that she and Rumi patrolling without him. Knowing that they wanted to speak privately, Izuku hugs Rumi goodbye before warping away. Appearing above the city, Izuku looked around to see if there were any signs of the Inhuman Supremacy Group members around. Not seeing anything, he opened the hero alert system on his phone and looked for recent protests or incidents. Previously, they were active around the Sendai region, so Invincible began his patrol there. Now above the area, he sees a large city, and using Quirk Sight, he sees a large contingent of mutation Quirk users all across the city. There was a small gathering of them in a square. The leader of the gathering was a man with a bare head and arms with sharp claws. Invincible landed on a street nearby, greeted some people on their way to work, and walked to the gathering. A few of the members spotted him and informed others in the crowd. The knowledge of his presence reached the leader, who quickly spotted Invincible and walked up to him. Invincible, may I ask why you are here? I've been hearing on the grapevine that a group of mutant protesters have been destroying public property. I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen. You wouldn't be familiar with this group responsible, would you? The Bearman is compelled. I do know who they are with. Fact. The other mutants in the gathering started shifting, looking for an opportunity to slip away. Would you kindly tell me the name of this group? It's the Inhuman Supremacy Group. Of course it's them. And you are part of that group, yes? Yes. Bring them here. What? Bring their leaders here. I'm sure you remember what happened yesterday. After all, you were going to use it to further your cause. The Bearman nervously took his phone out and called some people. It only took a few seconds of quiet whispering before he hung up. He looked toward Invincible, who still had a calm smile on his face. They are on their way. What are you so nervous about? I just wanted to have a chat is all. You can go about your protest while they're arriving. Invincible warps to the top of a nearby building and sits at its edge overlooking the gathering. The crowd tried to continue their preparation, but the extra scrutiny from above was quite distracting. After a few minutes, the buildings near the square were now saturated with mutation Quirk users before a car stopped nearby. From the car, a large wolfman and a man with a gas mask covering half of his face get out of the car. The two people walked toward the Bearman and spoke quietly before turning to face Invincible, who was sitting on the ledge of a building. The wolfman, flanked by the Bearman, and the person with the gas mask walked to Invincible, who simply pushed himself off of the building into free fall and landed on the sidewalk as if he had just walked out of the building he was just on. Now on the ground, the wolfman stepped forward. Invincible, you wanted to speak with me? I did, though I was wondering why many members of your group are gathered in the buildings around here. They were already coming here for the protest. Don't mind them. If you have questions, please speak them. I'll answer to the best of my ability. Fact. There have been reports on your group's protests having become more prominent, to say the least. Some of your members have been arrested, and they say the strangest things. Like, what, if I may ask? How mutants are the next step in evolution, but surely they hold the extremes of your group's beliefs. Of course, we of the Inhuman Supremacy Group merely advocate for the better treatment and image of our kind. Fiction. You said that the people in the building were a part of the protest, yes? I'll stick around when the protest begins. Hopefully, nothing happens today. By all means, hero. You may join us if you'd like. After all, you are a mutant too. Your word may be the catalyst that changes people's minds. Fact. I'll keep that in mind. With that, the leader leaves and joins the rest of the crowd. After another half an hour, their preparations were complete and they began their protest. The people in the buildings before joined, and now the crowd was quite large and packed. The ground rumbled slightly as they marched toward the city square holding signs which advocated their equality. No one stepped out of line, as if they were all robots obediently following orders. The protest lasted until the evening, when the group needed to return home and rest. The leader looked to be still full of energy, looking restless as he clenched his hands. Invincible warps down in front of the leaders. That protest went without incident. Good job. The outliers must have been removed from the previous arrest. Indeed. The Wolfman answered without much enthusiasm. Hey, cheer up. Even if the government hasn't heard your plight, the public surely has. The media people that were here looked disappointed that nothing happened. Keep on like this, I'm sure you'll get what you want eventually. Thank you, hero. Don't mention it. Invincible opened a warp gate behind him and turned to walk in. With his back turned to the leaders, he leaves some parting words. It was a great play you put on. You'd have a great career in acting. The hero leaves, leaving the Wolfman standing in front of the city square looking at the empty space where the hero once stood with a face full of bared teeth and clenched bleeding palms. Time passed, and the underworld had gotten a lot quieter since Invincible had been involved in many falls of different organizations. Due to the fact that the method by which Invincible infiltrated these organizations was unknown, it caused everyone to be extra cautious with every move they made. No one dared overstep their boundaries and shine a spotlight on themselves. Some of them even halted the international shipping contracts they had with other black markets, fearing what could be slipped in from them. Jiren, while happy to give the good news to his sire, was finding it difficult to get jobs and information as people were getting tight-lipped. The Inhuman Supremacy Group was still going strong and even got a few concessions, such as the outlawing of segregation in buildings and including accommodation for mutants in future building plans. They condemned the actions of their predecessors and vowed to not allow people like them to represent the group. Life went on as usual for Izuku, and if you asked him, it was quite boring. Anyone who could be a threat is too scared to fight him, and All for One had yet to make his supposed comeback. Honestly, Izuku wanted to see what plan he could cook up with the retaliation nullifiers shackled in his head. The new school year had come, and now Class 1 was now Class 2A. The year final was pretty rough for everyone, but they were able to pass with flying colors due to the efforts of Momo and occasionally Izuku, who helped them with subjects they were weakest in, but all of that was behind them now as the class was in Gym Gamma with Aizawa. Next to Aizawa was a man the class didn't recognize, and a woman they faintly remembered as the hero forced to kill by the former HPSC. Good morning, Class 2. We have new instructors as of today. Aizawa gestured to the new teacher, cueing them to introduce themselves. I am Lady Nagant, and my quirk is Rifle. Some of you may recognize me from a few months back when Midoriya sprung me from Tartarus. A few of the faces in the class lit up in recognition. The man was the next to introduce himself. My name is Walter C. Dornez, and I worked as a bounty hunter and butler in London. Any questions before we begin? Kaminari raised his hand. Where did you find a hot version of yourself? With that thought put in the class's heads, they looked between the two teachers and noticed the dark dress and similar stern look. Other than that, Walter looked well-kempt and put together. I have no idea how he came in contact with UA, but I know who brought him here. Aizawa's eyes were locked on Izuku, which answered their question. What quirk does Dornez have? Wire creation. Any other serious questions? No. Then let's get to today's training. So, this was the end of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.